Okay, I see my cockpit giving their thumbs up. Thank you so much and welcome everyone to our final session of our cycle, Rethinking Livestock. And we've gone through the lenses of ecology, economics, and real world systems. And let me just recap very shortly our last two sessions where we have looked at livestock from very different angles. We've been on animal microbiota, and we also saw how livestock is actually a part of a functional system, how does interact with landscapes, biodiversity, and we even touch the solar panel parks, if you remember. And I really hope that these conversations have shown that livestock are not only about production, but they are also about ecology, systems design, and a broader environmental and social value. And today, we bring you something that hopefully you will enjoy. We'll address the topic beyond meat, unlocking ecosystem value and farm performance. And we are inviting you into a journey across continents. So we will start in East Asia with Mongolia's pastoral systems. We will then move to Europe through the lenses of the Lean principles. And as we know, these are principles that are rooted in the Toyota production system based in Japan. And then we will take a quick fly over to Africa, where we will explore how this digitalization is shaping livestock systems. I believe this is a trip that is designed to expand our perspectives, leave us here some new ideas, new questions, and hopefully have a renewed sense of possibilities. As you know, my name is Claudia Costa. I'm the academic director here at Food for Sustainability. And I will also like to take this opportunity to warmly thank the team behind this webinar series that made possible all the past, the present, and the future sessions for their excellent work, for their dedication and collaboration in making everything possible. So many thanks to all of you. And as always, just before we start, I would like to just briefly highlight some of the core activities that we are developing here at Food for Sustainability. And I will start with our Regenerate Lab. As you know, this is our soil health and function laboratory. Here we study how living soils work and also how soils can be regenerated to support more resilient farming. We look at our lovely microbial communities, bacteria and fungi, to develop comprehensive soil microbiome analysis. And this is just our starting point, because then we move to the Ampliaqua. Here we focus on producing bio-based solutions, such, for example, specific microalgae that help soils cope with specific challenges, namely salinity, hydric stress, and other abiotic stresses. So, and again, you are all invited to visit Ampliaqua. This is quite an amazing system. We just need you to drop us a line. You have the email there, and we will organize everything for you. Also, I cannot go without mentioning our Aidanha Rural Food Park. This is our real-world laboratory. Here, we test how better soil health practices are actually translating into healthier crops, more nutrient-dense food, and how all of this connects into outcomes that are better for farms and also for the local communities. This is action happening in real time. But also, we would like to invite you, and if you are curious and if you are interested about these topics, also to join our Healthy Soil for Life, which is our summer program. This is a program that is dedicated to soil health, regeneration, with a lot of practical learning for those that actually want to deepen a little bit their understanding how soil can actually support resilient farming and sustainable landscapes. If this is a topic that is of interest to you, please I strongly encourage you to use this QR code to apply or simply to know a little bit more of what we have prepared for you. I can guarantee you this is a unique opportunity to engage more deeply with the topic, also to connect with like-minded people, to have a bit of fun and leisure, and of course, to be part of an incredible experience while we think about the future of soil and agriculture. So be daring, be bold. We wait to see you later on in this summer. And again, as usual, to join us in this wonderful topic, we are delighted to be joined by three excellent speakers. I will start with Lena Mitchell. She's a socio-ecological research. She's also the managing director at the International Takhi Group, and she works on pastoral systems, rangelands, and human-nature interactions. Lena, thank you so much to be here. It's really a pleasure. We also have David Crowfoot. He's a lean specialist and he's also the director of Footwork First, where they help farms to improve both financial performance and also environmental outcomes. David, thank you also for joining us today. And we are also joined by Simon Taugourdeau. Is a rangeland ecologist at CIRAD and is also affiliated with CELMET, Joint Research Unit. Simon brings strong ecological lenses to the functioning of rangelands and grazing systems. Simon, is also a pleasure and thank you so much for being here to join us in this debate, ecosystems value of the livestock and how this can all be translated into real farm performance. Thank you so much. And while we prepare for the warm-up, and I'll ask the team also to prepare the Slido for us to warm up, very short message about house rules. So let me remind you that these webinars are recorded. Okay. We also welcome your questions, and your questions will be addressed to our dear speakers at the end of each presentation. You have the chat here on Teams, or please do use Slido. That's also why I strongly invite you to join Slido. And at the end, you can get your certificate by filling in a very short quiz that the team has prepared for you. So it's not only about the certificate, it's of course also testing your knowledge and see what you have learned throughout this session. So time to do a little bit of warm up. Sophia, are we all ready to join Slido? Do we know how to join Slido? I think we can have the indications, we can have the procedure. Yes, here we are. So very easy. You can just use your this QR code, or very simply, you can use the browser in your PC, type in slido.com. The only tricky thing is where you have the hashtag box, just write this code F4S Academy. And let's see what the team has prepared for you. Let's, do a warm up about the topic and the importance of the issue that we are addressing today. So the first question, regenerative grazing. How does regenerative grazing support farms economics? We are looking for the main mechanism that regenerative grazing is directly linked to farm economics, building pasture resilience, raising livestock rates, stocking rates. So stocking rates is the number of animals that graze in a given area of land, or reducing climate risk, improving soil cover. So we are looking for the main mechanism, the main function where regenerative grazing supports farm economics. So we have a clear consensus throughout our audience. Give a little bit more time for you to think. I think this time we don't have a clear no. I think we could say that they are all related to farm economics. Let's see if anyone else would like to take part. Okay, we have a clear indication that building pasture resilience is the correct answer. Is it the correct answer? Yes, it is the correct answer. Well done, because regenerative grazing can improve pasture function and resilience, which definitely helps farms stay productive over time. Improving soil cover is definitely also very relevant because soil cover can improve farm function, but it's only part of a wider picture. And about the stocking rate, this is less accurate just because we know that we have to have some balance between the number of animals and the area that we have, because otherwise they can damage pasture health. So the link is not as direct, but none of them is totally wrong. Thank you so much for taking part. So another question. I don't know if you are fully aware what are the mechanism that is it happens when ruminants produce methane. So why do ruminants produce methane during their digestion? Surely this is a natural process. It has to have a reason, and it needs to be to keep nature into some balance. Is it because stomachs convert oxygen into methane? Is it because enzymes break down fiber and this process is turned releases methane? Is it microbes in ruminants use hydrogen during fermentation, or is it because methane is part of the protein digestion in the intestine? Okay, so this is a little bit more technical question. I have to say that I've learned something. I wasn't fully aware of the path for this methane production, and it's methane is very associated with ruminants. There's two more people thinking. So we have a consensus here. Anyone else would like to take part in this quiz? No, still thinking. This is a hard one. It's more technical, but the correct answer is actually microbes. They use hydrogen during fermentation and they produce methane in this process. So in ruminants, methanogenic microorganisms use hydrogen when they produce during fermentation, because this helps to keep the fermentation balanced. Is for a good reason. They're just not wanting to do emissions for the sake of doing emissions. They are trying to control a process during in the ruminants digestion. So this is a normal part of the rumen functions, but it also means that some energy is lost as a gas. Okay. The others are not quite correct. So I think we are ready to move uh, to our final question. And this is again an interesting question. Thanks for bringing this topic. The question is, it's milk produced by pasture fed or from high concentrated feeding systems? Why is this milk different? Okay, why do these two different diet approach have an impact on milk? Is it because pasture feeding turns ruminant acids directly into milk fat? Is it because fresh pastures change the fatty acids available to the cow, which then affects the milk composition? Is it because grass feeding stops rumen fermentation, so milk becomes mostly omega 3? Or is it because the difference is not really in the diet, but is more related to the breeds? Okay, so this is a very consensual one. So I can see that, you know, either we have a very knowledgeable or, not knowledgeable audience. Let's see. Anyone would like to give it a go? No? We are expecting to know what is the correct answer. Yes, you are absolutely right. The fresh pastures change the substrates available to the animal, which shifts the fatty acid profile that reach the mammary glands. This often leads to more unsaturated fats and also compounds such as omega-3 and CLA. So well done, guys. I'm really, really impressed with this audience. I'm sure our speakers are also impressed with the level of knowledge in this room. I'm sure we also have learned something. So I think we are ready to start. But I see that Lena, she's not there. She's not there. I don't know if she has a problem. So I think we actually need to move on. David, may I call you to our digital stage? Would that be okay?
Yes, that'd be fine. Sorry, I wasn't quite ready, but yes, that's fine. Oh, Lena is back. Do you want to go back to Lena?
Lena, are you ready?
I'm ready, yeah. Sorry, I have a
Okay.
teething baby in the background. I just needed a
Okay.
second. But I can start.
Okay. Thank you, Lena. Thank you. The floor is now yours.
So let me share my screen. And yes. You see my screen?
Yes, we see your screen
Okay,
in full mode
perfect.
presentation. Thank you, Lena.
So, thank you very much for having me today on this exciting webinar. I'm going to talk about herding in Mongolia. And I would like to start with the question, is livestock a global environmental problem or part of the solution? So rangelands cover more than 50% of our global landscape. And their pastoralism is the most common land use form worldwide, supporting over 200 millions of livelihoods and a large cultural diversity. They are so important that the UN General Assembly actually dedicated the year 2026 to the International Year of Rangelands and Pastoralism. However, globally, grazing systems are often framed as a problem. But this view is kind of incomplete because we have a high variability in the drylands. This is often overlooked. The importance of mobility and the role of local knowledge are often not considered when we talk about this dominant narrative of overgrazing and degradation. To better understand both challenges and opportunities of grazing systems, we need to look at real-world problems. And one of the most important cases or prime example is actually Mongolia, because Mongolia is a very pastoral country where 1/3 of the population are still living a herding lifestyle. They have over 70 million livestock heads in Mongolia, and as a comparison, only 3.5 million people. And herding is very much rooted in the culture and tradition. 80% of of Mongolia's land is used extensively, but over 70% of the land is degraded to a certain extent by a UNDP study. And in Mongolia, herding is really the backbone of the of the society and also of the economics. It's still a big economic part as well, and encompass big landscapes actually. To understand current dynamics in Mongolia, we need to consider political and economic transformations. Mongolia was, as a satellite state, part of the Soviet Union. And during the Soviet times, Herders were part of collectives. Livestock belonged to the state, and herd sizes and seasonal movements was all coordinated and regulated by the state. With the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991, Mongolia turned to a market economy. Livestock got privatized, many people lost their jobs and became herders again. And nowadays, mobility, also seasonal movements, herd sizes, and the overall management of livestock are based on household level again. And at the same time, there is an increasing demand for cashmere wool internationally, leading to strong market incentives. And this led to a very sharp increase of livestock numbers in the last 30 years. The main livestock species in Mongolia are goats, sheep, horses, cattle, and camels. And in black, you can see here the total livestock numbers. They were quite stable until the 1990s, and then they were going up until 70 million livestock heads. And this has fundamentally changed how grazing systems in Mongolia function. As a result, we observe a set of interconnected socio-ecological challenges. One big challenge is actually climate change. So Mongolia is hit by climate change quite hardly, with a temperature increase of over 2 degrees already. Precipitation is somehow getting more, but this is not really understood well, but the variability in precipitation is very high interannually, but also between the years. And there's an increased risk of extreme winter events, so-called zoots. This is a very severe winter condition where temperatures fall to -40, -50 degrees over weeks, often combined with a high snow cover, and basically livestock and wildlife freezes and starves to death, so leading to mass mortality events. We do see local overgrazing, often especially around settled centers, but also in different regions, especially in central Mongolia. And there are different socioeconomic changes. So urbanization is an issue. So young people are moving to the city centers, but there are also social changes that, for example, in households, the husbands are staying in the field with the livestock, the wives are going to the cities with the children that they can go to school, and basically the family has to sustain 2 households. So they have an economic pressure to increase livestock. Nowadays, everybody is having a car, and life is generally getting more expensive. And all of this leads to pasture degradation and desertification. And on this map, we see this over 70% of pasture degradation, especially here in central Mongolia. The outcomes of land degradation are triggered by climate change and resource overuse, are an increased fluctuation, precipitation, and this increased risk of zoot events. And this also leads, often leads then as well, the overuse of resources leads to plant species diversity loss and decrease of palatable plant species. So sometimes you really see green pastures, but there's basically nothing to eat for livestock. Soil degradation and increased sandstorms are also an issue. So, for example, there are now in Japan and Korea sand from the Mongolian Gobi Desert found. However, these systems hold also a significant potential. So I show here on the map seasonal movements in the Jungarian Gobi Desert. This is in southwestern Mongolia, and their herders are highly, highly mobile. So they move 9 times per year with their livestock, with all their belongings. They have really a high mobility throughout the seasons, and they have very flexible decision making. So not just between camp moves, but also their daily grazing movements are really much based on biomass availability, and they make really use of these heterogeneous landscapes. And for example, here in the Jungarian Gobi deserts, Herders spend the summers up in the so-called Altai mountains, where we have a high biomass availability, and then they move throughout the year down to the Chinese border, where they spend in the Gobi Desert the winters. And this is all based on traditional knowledge. So this is really, the flexibility and high mobility patterns are, basically reading the landscape, right? And the same processes can lead to degradation, but they can also support a resilient system under the right conditions. So livestock are ecosystem engineers, or livestock and herders. And in the steppe regions, livestock moving between seasonal camps, transport nutrients over kilometers and really effectively connecting distant patches of landscape. So we have really through seasonal pasture rotation, recovery of pastures again. It reduces the pressure on these pastures. And in Mongolia, it's especially nice that you have mixed livestock herds. So you have goats and sheep, which are mainly herded, but also cattle, horses, and camels, which are basically let out free. So equally important are social dimensions. So herders have this deep ecological knowledge and build up over generations, and they really make fine-scale decisions based on weather, pasture conditions, and risks. But they are part of a market economy nowadays. So cashmere is their main income source. And we can see on this graph here on the right side in orange, the cashmere prices over the last 10 years, and you see very high fluctuations. So herders can actually not really plan their finances very well, because their main income source is really cashmere, but it depends from year to year how the price looks like. But they, life is getting more expensive. In blue here, you can see the National Consumer Price Index. So this is basically the price for a common food basket. And this is growing up a lot. And this economic pressure leads to this increased livestock numbers. The working routines of Mongolian herders is still very much family-centered. So in many other regions of the world, you often see contracted herders, you have livestock owners and they contract a herder, but in Mongolia, most of the people still herd their own livestock. And we have an urbanization trend. So basically, young people are moving to the cities. So we see in the systems a lot of challenges and opportunities, and challenges are really this reduced mobility in some regions. People are settling down more and more, reducing mobility. Resource overuse. Then we have these social challenges of market pressures on international markets, urbanization, and climate change is a big issue. And on the other side, the system also holds big opportunities. So there can be adaptive grazing, mobility can be practiced, leading to vegetation recovery. And there's also a huge potential for sustainable markets of sustainable value chains, and also this traditional knowledge put into governance is actually holding a big potential. So what this brings us to the key insight. We're not looking at a simple story here of degradation. We are looking at a system that can move in two directions. So grazing can be problematic when livestock numbers grow without control, when mobility is restricted, and when decisions are driven by short-term pressures. The same system can also lead to a sustainable grazing management when mobility is maintained, when knowledge guides decisions, and if systems are supported institutionally. So it's really important that traditional knowledge, the incentive to mobility, and governance comes into place. And policies often fail because they simplify these highly dynamic systems. And it's really the future of pastoral systems in Mongolia will not be determined by livestock numbers alone, but by how we manage mobility, knowledge, and governance. And we need to move beyond this concept of a carrying capacity model, for example, defining how many livestock numbers we can have on a certain area. We need to recognize mobility as a management strategy. From a scientific point of view, there needs to be long-term monitoring on pastures, and local knowledge or traditional knowledge needs to be integrated into governance. And so grazing is basically not good or bad. It really depends on how you manage it. And then grazing can really be sustainable. Yeah, thank you very much. It brings me to the end.
Thank you, Lena, for such an interesting presentation and for sharing a different experience from the other side of the world, at least from this perspective. We have a clarifying question here in the chat. In Mongolia, do they use horses and camels for meat? What is the main purpose
As well,
of this?
It different purposes. So this is actually, I mean, nowadays horses and camels are mainly a status symbol. Camels were used for transportation, but nowadays most of the camp moves are done also by cars. And horses are mainly also kind of it's also basically a status symbol, and people use it for horse racing and so on. But they do slaughter as well in winter.
Yeah. I think it's also an important part of the culture.
The culture,
Also
yeah.
the animals and okay, good. Lena, I know that you kind of addressed throughout your presentation, but we have heard that herding in Mongolia, as you clearly mentioned, also depends on mobility, flexibility, and also a deep knowledge of the landscape. If we turn to Europe, what we see is that many livestock producers are actually facing the opposite. So there's more fixed systems, higher input costs, labor shortage, and we also have the climate pressure. So what lessons do you think the European producers could learn from the Mongolian herding about resilience, adaptation, and this very important part, which is keeping the livestock connected with the land? What would be your key recommendations or your key learning points?
Yeah, I think it's really one really important point is really that governance is allowing and policy are into place that mobility is possible. And I think this is really a huge issue in Europe, that this is often not in place, and it's not in I mean, when do we see herders, right? I mean, I'm always happy if I see some in Germany, but it's very seldom. And it's basically with our infrastructure and everything not as possible as it's in Mongolia, of course. But I think this high flexibility is really a key issue. And this is really, the secret, I think, in Mongolia, that they can really adapt, from month to month and everything. I think it's also something in Mongolia very special that herders are recognized as something. Herding is recognized as a very as a profession which has a high status. That it's really something. It's not something. It's considered that it's something where you need knowledge as well. It's not just something anyone can go out and herd. So it's basically reading your animals, reading the landscape, reading the weather, everything, right?
It's the social perceptions also about these professions that at least here in the Western Europe, we really need to do some work on that, on how farmers are perceived, how shepherds are perceived, and definitely this question of the social status is really, really important. We need to valorize more these professions for sure. Lena, one final question, and maybe this is coming from someone who has already faced these issues. Do you have any data about how predators could be shaping grazing patterns? So it's a
Um,
question of the
mhm.
predators.
Predators, yeah. I have an example from a herding family which moved in autumn, and I asked them why, and they said we hear every night a snow leopard, or our dogs are barking every night, and there are snow leopards in the mountain coming down, and then they basically move. But it depends on where you are in Mongolia, where the kind of how much the pressure is, right? In the Gobi systems, you have still not that many people, not that much livestock, so people have the flexibility to move, right? And basically, I mean, there is also hunting. That's not, or yeah, but basically, most of the time, herders just leave when there are predators around, and I found this is a very it's a very positive reaction, actually. But this is
Okay.
also not the case everywhere, of course.
But it's definitely important to have a balance between, this profession of raising livestock and, the way predators also have
Definitely.
the entitled to live, but they also need to be controlled. And eventually, if nature is balanced,
Yeah.
things can be, more balanced. We also have that issue here in Portugal, and sometimes things get out of control because the nature is not balanced. Lena,
Yeah,
thank you
exactly.
very much.
Yeah.
You have a question in the chat, but we need to move on. Lena, if you can just look at the chat, we truly
Look,
appreciate.
thank
Thank
you.
you so much. David, I hope now you are inspired by the Mongolian example. But let's go back to Europe. Let's see how lean principles apply to livestock management. The floor is yours, David.
Thank you. Just making sure I'm sharing my screen.
Yes, we can see your
Yeah,
presentation full mode.
brilliant.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak today. So I'm going to cover quite a large topic in 15 minutes, but I will do my best to do that. So I'm going to start with a bit of the origins of where lean comes from, what it is in broad terms, the principles, how we've applied those principles to dairy, and then I thought I'd end with some sort of more practical examples and some case studies. So first of all, I think Claudia mentioned that that lean comes from Toyota, and it was developed post-war, and mainly it was driven by circumstance. It was driven by a lack of resource in terms of materials, in terms of money, in terms of people, and so it was developed out of a need. The other thing is what it also was up against was mass production. So mass production being making one thing, lots of one thing. And the challenges with that were lack of customer choice, and it was slow to react to changes. And also people who worked in mass production didn't like it as well. So I think the interesting thing from a farming perspective is some of these are true of farming today in terms of resource availability, in terms of really the mass production of food and the mass production of materials to make food is still true as well. So I think there's some insights into that. So started post-war Japan, started by Toyota, and some of the challenges are similar. So what is it? So it's a structured approach. It's based on some principles. It's based strongly on some principles that are supported by lots of different models, tools and techniques, lots and lots of different things. So I'm going to focus a bit today on the principles rather than the tools and techniques. But broadly, it does three things. It helps people to see opportunities for improvements and challenges within business. It gets people to look at things in a slightly different way. It helps people really do some structured problem solving around when they see those opportunities, what should they do about it? And finally, it embeds continuous improvement. So it focuses on what's the mechanisms on a daily basis to see how things could improve. So again, helps to see, helps with problem solving, and continually improves. With the implementation of lean in any sector, but particularly in farming. Our role really is to upskill farmers to do this themselves rather than us come and tell them the approach and the solutions. So they enable them to develop and own the improvements within their farm and their extended team. So this is very much an approach that is about teaching and learning for the farmers rather than it is a bunch of things that we turn up and tell people to do. So I'm going to focus a bit on the lean principles. So if people are interested, lean principles were developed by Womack and Jones in a book called Lean Thinking. They studied Japanese manufacturing techniques and pulled out these 5 principles about why it was more efficient and more productive than Western manufacturing at that time. So I'm going to go through these in sort of broad terms, and then I'm going to talk about them in the context of a dairy farm. So the first of the principles is specify value. So this is about being really clear about, in the eyes of the customer, what we're here to do. So I'm going to talk about these broadly in any system. So why are we here? What are we doing for the customer? Being really, really clear about the value to the customer. The second principle is understand all of the work and activity, the value stream that delivers that value to the customer. The third principle being, we then look at all of the activity that does not add value. So we have some very clear rules about what is value in a process. So can we eliminate all of the non-value adding activity so the value flows? We then look at pulling towards the customer. So the customer should be triggering an order. We should not be making lots of things on the basis someone buy it. We want the customer to pull the orders towards them. And finally, seek perfection by continually improving towards it. So as I mentioned in the previous slide, continuous improvement being a real bedrock of lean. How can we make small incremental changes to continually improve? So they're the principles. Those principles, I've been doing lean for about 20 years now. These apply in manufacturing. I work in the financial sector. I work in charities. I work in museums, and I work on farms. These are the things that apply to all of those different businesses. So how does this work within dairy farming? So first of all, this understanding the value and the value stream, the first 2 principles. So for a dairy farm, the key value of a dairy farm, hopefully this won't be a surprise to people, is milk that comes out of the dairy farm. So we make sure everything is aligned to the production of milk, to the specified quality, and some other conditions as well. So the value being the milk to the customer. We use something around Lego to help explain these principles. Sorry, I meant to say. So I said this was very much a training and a learning exercise. When we do implement lean, we use lots of exercises and training to get people to see these things out of context. So all of our journeys start with playing with Lego. So we normally get a production facility making little Lego products like that one that's on the slide there. And that helps demonstrate the key aspects of lean. So first one being value. The value stream is the thing that delivers the value. How does it perform? So the value is milk. The value streams are the activities that deliver that milk. So in a dairy farm, there's 3 key blocks to that. The big one being the production of milk and the cycle of the production of milk. But we've also got replacements into the herd. We've also got exits from the herd as well. So we understand that value stream and we understand how it performs. And we look particularly at range of performance across different things. So these are key first steps. Understand the value stream. What we're then looking for is how can we understand the things that are getting in the way of adding value. So not like manufacturing or most other industries where people and machines are the value adders in a business, it's the cow in a dairy farm. And we focus our effort on what can we do to enable the cow to produce value. And to produce value, cows need to spend the majority of their day laying down, drinking, and eating in broad terms, and some other things as well. So how do we enable cows to do those things in the most productive way? So that's what we do with understanding flow. So we remove the things that are barriers to cows being able to move, to lie down, to eat, and to drink. Also, the value stream gives us some indication of where issues or opportunities for improvement might lie. And we take those and we go through something called structured problem solving. So lots of farms have advisors, and they're often focused on solutions, and we anchor this all back onto, can we understand the problem we're trying to address and look for root cause. The next step is about establishing pull. So when we speak to dairy farms and you ask them what they do and talk about their farms, they often talk about how many cows they have, which is a nice metric, but not how many litres they produce. So we start to anchor all the decisions about the milk and the demand from the customer. And then we start to build the systems that pull towards that. So how many cows do we need? How many replacements do we need? What are the facilities we need to support them? Pull is based around having excessive stock or not having excessive stock. Excessive stock often is costly, but it covers lots of problems. So what happens if you've got excessive stock is when things go wrong, it doesn't matter as much. So it does give us the ability to not worry about things as much. We have this rivers and rock analogy within manufacturing, which I've converted to replacement heifers coming through the system. If we've got problems with infectious disease, other health, repo issues, death, injury, if we've got a huge pipeline of animals coming through, those things aren't as big a problem. And actually what we're trying to do with Lean is get to a point where we have a reasonable level of stock, but actually we're not using it to cover up issues. And finally, seek perfection, continuous improvement. So this is about, on a daily basis, can we just make small incremental changes? So it's about making these small changes. It's about doing them often. It's about those things rather than making one huge change and never being able to do it due to costs and constraints and all of those types of things. So lots and lots of small things. What we try and do is really get farmers to think about this cycle of plan, do, check, act in their daily work. So are they creating a plan? Are they doing the work? Are they checking how they've done? And are they making improvements based on what they said they'd do compared to how it actually was delivered? So that's how we apply these principles on farms. Let me tell you the types of results that we get. So we've been doing a number of programs. The one that we've done the most of most recently is dairy, but I've worked in horticulture, worked in pig farming, worked in dairy across some fairly large farms. Always the aim of these is upskilling the farm. So it's all a mix of training and doing. And the return on the investment ranges from 5 to 1 to 12 to 1. And the investment to make these changes that we make to realize these savings is fairly small. So you're seeing here there's sort of programs are sort of 8 to 10 to 14 farms with savings ranging from 50,000 per farm to about 130 per farm in dairy. So fairly significant for the investment. These programs are run by either organizations or, in the case of dairy, we're working for Leprino Foods, who make mozzarella. And what they want from the program is some environmental improvements. So we work with the farm on efficiency, but what Leprino wants is the environmental benefits. So just quickly on the environmental benefits. So for those dairy farms that are in the program, we see carbon audits show a reduction of 3 to 10% in their carbon footprints. And on year 2, we're seeing that moving up to about 26% reduction. And this is based on 2 things, really. Efficiency is about inputs and outputs. So producing more or the same output using the same or fewer inputs. So this is producing more milk with fewer or the same inputs in terms of feed, cows, energy, fertilizer. So that means we have more milk with lower emissions per kilogram. The other thing, without getting into this too much, this graph on the right-hand side shows the correlation between young stock and the carbon footprint across farms as well. So having a high degree of young stock compared to older stock, it doesn't help environmentally as well due to the impact of the breeding and growing of that animal. So just a few practical examples just before I finished. From a point of view of dairy, this is quite an interesting thing. We look at performance across a dairy herd. So the graph on the left is a herd. Every dot is an animal's yield, and across the bottom is the lactation number. And what we're looking for there is variety in performance. So high range of performance from the top to the bottom. And that's an indication there's normally pressure on the system if there's a huge range between performance of animals. Being hierarchical and being in a situation where they're fighting for feed space or for beds, etc., we have a look at, are we preventing cows being able to do the things they need to do to produce the value? So the example, a very simple example there, is looking at a shed with some cubicles, and we found that not many cows were lying down. So the cubicles in the front, we made some adjustments to the cubicles to make them more appropriate, and the ones at the back were yet to be changed. So the ones at the front, you can see they're all lying down, and at the back, there's still quite a lot standing in the beds. And cows produce an extra litre a day for every hour they lay down. So quite an important performance metric for them. So we increase yield by that improved lying time. And it potentially increases the percentage of protein, which for the Leprino mozzarella contract is very important. Other things we do is we see that access to feed is animals being able to get to the feed face. So again, we look at how we can introduce extra feed face, and again, we see fairly significant and immediate effect of adding the capability for animals to feed. Some other things around dairy, we've used some visual management to help with fertility planning and monitoring. So this was actually up in the farm, and we saw some improvements in fertility rates and therefore improvements in yield and costs, etc., by about 64,000. Milking parlours, we've done some working. We are interested again because we want to milk and get the cows back to what they should be doing in terms of lying down, feeding or drinking. That actually we're trying to reduce milking time so the animals can get through. So we've looked at batching in smaller quantities. We've also looked at just the flow of animals through the parlour. One of the biggest things is thinking about replacement. So on that principle of pull, we look at how can we actually have the right amount of stock rather than too much stock. So lots of farms tend to push lots of replacements into the herd, which means often that they're pushing productive cows out of the herd because of space issues. And we've seen lots of big savings in terms of production and in terms of cost, ranging from about 50 to 400,000. So all of these costs are obviously dependent on the size of the farm, etc., and the scale of the problem. I'd just give a couple of horticulture examples. Quite different in horticulture, lots of labour, so it's a bit more labour focused. But the things that we often see within horticulture is about, again, this process of thinking about what's the value add in the process and how can we minimise all the things that aren't value add. So the left-hand side is people sticking seeds into trays for growing, and we had people could do that. I can't remember if this was per minute or what it was, but double the performance in one person compared to another. And it really wasn't about their speed of sticking, it was how well they were organized, how they held things in their hand, etc. So it was learning how we reduce that non-value add rather than value add. And similarly with picking. So when we're in fruit farms with picking, we're often presented with, here's some quick, these are the fastest pickers we have, and here's the slowest. And when we analyze those, they're not picking any quicker. They're just far better organized and planned in terms of spending more time picking than not picking. So the way they organize themselves, the way they get rid of the non-value add. And that was it from me.
Thank you very much, David. very interesting and inspiring. And while you were presenting, I was just thinking this example where applying these lean principles in dairy farm have somehow forced you to have into consideration that you were actually working with a living cow and not with a machine or with a Toyota car, for example, something that where the lean principle had to be more flexible to address living organisms.
Yeah, I think it was a big moment for us to suddenly think about the value add isn't machine and people. You know, a dairy farm has, you know, generally in the UK has 3 or 4 people, and the dairy cow, there's lots of them, and it was a big moment of actually saying these are the things that add value, and this is what we're going to focus our using the tools and principles on. Which lean has been done in dairy farming before, but it's mostly been done around labour.
Okay, so actually, there's no constraint because we are dealing with living animals to apply the lean principles, right? Also, lean principles are management principles, and I'm quite curious to know whether there is a minimal or even a certain level of management structure so that we can implement this kind of changes, or do you think it applies to any type of business, any size, anywhere?
I think at a principal level, it applies to any business, any size, anywhere. As I say, dairy farms are generally in the UK small. We've been on bigger businesses. I've been on fruit farms where there's hundreds and hundreds of people and very, very sort of clear structures and management structures. But at a principal level, they apply. It's the complexity that you put within them around the systems for change, etc. It's easier to change a few people and so hopefully some cows rather than a huge organization with lots of people.
Yeah, well, but the potential is it's I would say it's larger when there are a lot of people to be organized. And in terms of we were talking about a moment ago about farmers and the way the system is organized. How has been have these principles been well received in the farming community? Is it through farmers, or is it more through these big industrial players that in terms of management principles, they are quite well organized and very efficient? Where is the trigger point?
I think from a point of view, it's received by the farms well, because I think it isn't particularly going onto farms to tell them what to do or to come up with solutions. So I think farms appreciate that. I should say for the work we do on dairy farms, I'm partnering with practicing dairy vets. So we're coming onto farms with a level of expertise. It's not just the principles, but we use the lean tools to help us make decisions with the dairy vets. I think from a point of view of making it happen, if I'm being honest, I think it needs the processors of the milk to sort of work with their suppliers, because it's hard. It's hard to motivate the farms to do something that's a fairly intense program. And I think it's definitely helped with the processes. So I think the advantage, because the processors can see the environmental improvements from doing this work, and we can keep the financial benefits to the farms, it then works really well. So I think our model will always be driven by the processors, I think.
Okay, it makes sense because it's from the outside, from the outset, it's not easy to ask for change. And in processes and procedures, if you don't know exactly how much is going to save in terms of efficiency, in terms of processes, in terms of animal health, if you don't have those numbers at the beginning, it might be difficult to convince that we need to change.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. Thank you, David. I don't see at this stage more questions from the audience, so I will move on. David, if you can stay a little bit longer, we truly appreciate. I'm sure some more questions will pop up. Now we're going to fly to Africa, more precisely Morocco, where we have Simon. Hello. Bonjour.
Hello.
So we can
Bonjour.
see your presentation. Your presentation. Thank you so much. The floor
Yeah,
is now
thank you.
yours.
Thank you. So, thank you. I am Simon Taugourdeau. So, I am, as you say, rangelands ecological at CIRA. That is a French institution, but that is working abroad to help the development of agriculture. So, today I will speak about the use of digital technology in pastoralist system, mostly in Africa. So, when we talk about digital technology, we talk about different things that is occurring recently. It's increase in computer power, so more calcul than before. The fact that now you have a very small sensor, so now you can go use UAV and so on to have your data. And also now the connectivity that may make shareable databases and so on that we can use. When we talk about digital technology in agriculture, we have a very strong use in intensive system, mostly in a cropping system. When you see now farmers are using UAV, are using remote sensing images and so on to help them work. However, in pastoralism, it's difficult because first of all, when we talk about pastoralism, it's on very large area with very heterogeneous area. For example, if you think about savanna where you have trees and grasses and so on. In like Lena present for Mongolia, but the same in Africa, it's a collective land, so it means that several people can use the grazing area. So you don't have an owner that can use technology to improve this land. Also, when you talk about pastoral people, they are people that are very poor, so they are limited investment capacity at farm level. So at the end, when we talk about digital tools, it's mostly for mapping the resources to support public policy. So I will present some work that are already done now, and after I will present some future ideas. So what is important in resource mapping? So when I talk about resource, I talk about vegetation. So it's the basis of animal feed. It's that if you are able to assess the condition of pastoral resources, you can after predict mobility. As Lena says before, in Mongolia is the same in Africa. The herder go where the food is. So if you have one area with a strong impact of climatic change, they could change mobility. And it's very important because, for example, in Africa, in Sahel region, the pastoral people go from one country to another country. For example, here I present the case of Senegal, but people from Mauritania also start the year in Mauritania and finish the year in Senegal. So you need to have some contract between the state to allow this mobility. Other thing that the pastoral people go to agricultural area at the end of the rainy season. And so if the situation is bad, they can have conflict between cropping area and pastoral people. So the remote sensing is very important to identify a pastoral crisis, eventually to have a policy. So that is during the year. After, we also now use long-term resource mapping to identify the areas that are degraded. So if you see that the quantity of vegetation is degrading to the year, you can apply policy. Now we also use this type of images to make carbon monitoring for green gases emissions. And also now to monitor land restoration, for example, reforestation. So in Senegal is one of the only country that are able to do that in Sahel region. We have one institution that is called Centre de Suivi Écologique, while working with them, that are able since 1997 to make a map of the quantity of vegetation available for pastoral herds. They go to the field, they make measurement of the quantity of vegetation in the field, and after they make a calibration, so a mathematical link between this type of quantity of vegetation and remote sensing images from satellite. So we are able now to do it every year because they do it at the end of the rainy season that in Senegal is ending in October. So when the rain is stopped, they go to the field, measure the quantity of vegetation, and make an assessment of how much quantity of food is available for pastoralism. Now they also improve their work with now they use other type of remote sensing images to be able to assess the quantity of vegetation, but the dry vegetation. It means that even during the dry season, they are able to see how much feed is still available for pastoral system. And so, for example, they can assess the impact of wildfire and so on to see if the vegetation is still available for pastoralism. Now also we are using a very high resolution, so new type of images that we were able to see each tree in fidelity. So now with a colleague from the University of Copenhagen, we are working to evaluate the quantity of trees. So we are using big intelligence artificial data analysis to evaluate to identify each tree present in the region. And so what we did is to compare now the quantity of trees within the area that were reforested by the state and the area that were not reforested to the state to evaluate the assessment of the quantity of carbon that are stocked by this reforestation policy. So just here is just few results. But the problem is that in this case, we are limited to 1 meter resolution. And so when you look at this picture, you see that vegetation of savanna is very heterogeneous. So what we want to use is to use drones or UAV because they are able to have a very high resolution that fits with the heterogeneity of rangeland. But the problem is that UAV cannot only be used on few hectares, but it captures the strong heterogeneity of rangeland. So what we did is that we make a measurement on the field, measurement with UAV. We create a map of resources at very high resolution, so something like 1 centimeter. And after we make a calibration between these very high maps and the satellite images. So here it's just to show statistic. And after we are able to do maps using only UAV images instead of field work. So it's very interesting. However, UAV is limited because in many countries, especially in some countries in Africa, it's not allowed to use a drone. Also, it needs skills, so you need to have people that are able to fly the drone. And so what we are working now is to use directly smartphone, camera on smartphone as a data sources. So we develop a protocol that can be used by everybody to assess the quantity of vegetation using only the camera. And I have other colleagues that are working with an application that is called PlantNet, that is now an application that is widely used, that you take a picture of one plant and you have the species composition. So with only smartphone, we can assess the quantity, so the biomass of the rangeland and the composition in species. So it's something that we made. So this paper is available freely. It's that we, based on this result, we make an idea is to use the people on the ground with their smartphone to assess the quantity of vegetation. In this way, to have a participatory observatory of rangeland monitoring at the scale of the country. So the thing is that you have your breeder that are on the ground. He takes a picture of this vegetation. He has a quantity of vegetation available. After, because we have a lot of people in the ground, we have a lot of observation, and we can provide a map at the end. The main thing is that we need to motivate the breeder to take pictures. So for example, he can have feedbacks on the quantity or the quality of the vegetation for him. So here it's a different option that we can, in question that state has to answer. Which are the people that go to the ground to make the observation? Which people will use this map? And what type of motivation they want? Do you need to pay the people that will take picture, or do you need just to give them information? In this case, which type of information? So all this is to build an participatory observatory. And so the main thing that we need to ask is what are really the needs of the pastoral herders? Do we need a quantity of vegetation, something that is more qualitative, good, bad, and so on? How this new information from digital sources is redundant with the information they already have, because, for example, herders use social network, their knowledge to assess the quality of the vegetation. we need to be very careful that because in most situation, maybe it's only the big herder that have access to smartphone, and so they could have gain more than the small herders. Which type of variable are an interest for the herder, and also how to fund this type of observatory. So thank you for your attention, and just to present some ideas on about rangeland observatory.
Simone, it was a pleasure to see your project and to see how things are working, also in a different context. But I think we can always take some lessons and at least some questioning about your experience there. So you mentioned about introducing remote sensing, drones, and AI in pastoral systems, and I was very curious about how do you make sure that the people are trained not only just to use the tools but also to interpret all this information and turn it into actual decisions? And I think this is also relevant because in Europe we are also experiencing this divide between the rural and the urban worlds, and so what does it take to keep this model working in practice, both in terms of skills and if you can comment on the investment also?
Yeah, so the main thing is that for the moment, most of the use of digital technologies is for policy. So it's not for directly for the order, because it's more for the state to organize, to know if you have a problem this year or not. So if these people are well trained. After the main thing is, and also is a thing that we need to discuss, is to identify which type of information is useful for others, and which type of information that they can understand. So if they are, they can maybe understand good, bad, and so on, but a quantity or some biochemical parameters of the feed is not good. So it's something that you need to co-construct with the order. So you need to go to the field, discuss with them, see what is their interest. Yes, for the investments, it's a good question, because we need at least to develop apps and so on and so on. So in most of the country, it could be aid development to know, because it's a very problematic situation in very country where also pastoralism, they are the first one to submit climate change, and also in Sahel region, they are also the one that are submitting terrorism attacks and so on and so on. So maybe to go this way after, to see how you can keep the server and the application running. So yeah, it's a good question, because we cannot ask the order to pay for information. It's very difficult, and I think so yeah, you have to find a funding that are able, but maybe the state or organization can do it.
Okay, so Simon, and while you develop those tools and you are more familiar with working with these tools and apply them to pastoralism, do you think these digital tools make pastoralism more attractive to younger generations? So it goes back to the conversation that we were having. So can these skills be something that we instill in the system, so that all of a sudden it's again sexier for younger generations? And where should this, in your perspective, at in what stage of the system this should come? Is it through universities? Should we bring it earlier on in the education systems? Do we need to have Hollywood, sponsoring?
Yeah,
What's your views?
yeah, so first of all, it depends of the country, because for example, in Africa, in most of the country, I know the elder are not going to school and so on and so on, because it's very difficult, because they have a lot of mobility. So maybe it's you need to think about it. But for Europe and maybe also Northern Africa, it's something that we can discuss to see if the use of technology, because here I only talk about resource mapping, but you can have a GPS on the animals and so on, that helps also to hurt the animals. So maybe yes, but after you have to be careful, because when we talk about digital agriculture, it's mostly high investment but for high profit. in pastoralism, it's not the case. You don't have a lot of profit, so you need to be careful to not sell a lot of equipment to people that have very few revenue. So yeah, I think it's something that we need to be sure. Mostly, the thing is to develop tools that are based on equipment that people have, for example, smartphone. I know that people are also working on developing app for market application, to know the price of the animals, to find solution and so on. So you have all this aspect to deal with when you talk about digital technologies. But yeah, it's something that, for example, in agriculture is very well known, but for pastoralists, we need to find how digital technology can be useful, and that doesn't want to say that it will change all the world, but find a small solution and see how it will impact after the people.
Yes, and you raise an important point. It's not about high productivity, but it's about restoring landscapes, and it's about carbon sequestration and climate resilience. And when we start to actually have the correct price on these issues, probably it's a lot of money that we are talking about, and that's why we need these systems. So, but thank you so much, Simone, for this approach. We have a question here in the chat, and maybe you can just go back to the name of the app. And the question is the app that you just referred available for the public to download and use on iPhones? And here is the name of the app. Thank you.
Yeah. PlantNet is you can use, I think, on iPhone, Android. I am not sure, but yes, it's widely used, and so it's an app that you use to identify plants, and so you take picture and you identify the plants. So it's very useful. Now my colleague are also using, for example, weed estimation in cropping area and so on. And so I don't remember exactly the thing, but it's something like they have 1 billion of pictures of plants, so it's very useful. And now they are developing this tool mostly in Europe, but now they are opening it in Asia, Africa, and Northern America. So yes, you can use it, and it's free. So you just put pictures of the plant, and you have the name of the species that is coming back.
Okay, thank you for this clarification. Let me just remind the audience that if there are some details that you have missed, we're going to make all of this available, and you can check later on our website. So we are approaching the end of our session. I'm going to open the questions to all of the speakers and give them the opportunity to stress some important points that you feel that needs to be made clear to our audience. And for me, it would be very helpful also to hear your perspective in how to balance this more short-term economic pressures, and particularly the time that we are facing here in Europe. So many crises, petrol crisis, fertilizers crisis, the climate crisis, and this long-term approach that we need to have to ecosystem health, that we are desperately needing to ensure that we leave something better, or at least functionable for the next generations. Where do you see where should we first act to have this balanced, more clear and manageable? So short-term economic pressures, longer-term ecosystem health. Is it through lean approach, David? Can we sort this? Can we make a lot of money and still care for the environment? At least you showed some ways forwards. Do you want to comment?
Yeah, so obviously I'm biased, so I'd say yes, definitely. But I think the challenge around businesses is really about being as efficient as possible on the basis of being able to manage and survive these ups and downs of crisis at a local level. And from an environmental point of view, I think, although not my particular topic, but the proper making sure that every resource we do use is productive is really, really important. So I think those two things are the things that, from a lean perspective, I think are really important to be, really clear about what we're trying to do in terms of our cost of production, but also in terms of minimizing our use of resource.
David, let me just tap in because we have a question in the chats is asking to define again, Lynn. Of course, you cannot go into all these details. We don't have time, but at a personal level, and bearing in mind we want to live, a better world, what Lean principle could we apply to our daily lives?
So I think so I'll have a go at defining Lean. So Lean is a management system. It's a total system is what it is. It's a way of working. It is what Lean is. In terms of what we can apply to our daily lives, I think the focus on the value, the focus on what is the thing that's the value here, what is the important thing for the customer, is always where we start with Lean. I think that's a really, really important principle to take to lots of different things, that just make sure we're clear about what we're actually doing here. And is everything we're doing delivering that value or not?
And it allows us to focus on what really, really matters.
Yeah, focus on what matters and say, are these things therefore not adding value? And why should we be doing them if that's the case?
Yes, that's a good point for us to think more. Lena, Simone, any other perspectives to add?
Yeah, maybe I just covered that very shortly. I think it's very important that when we look at this grazing and pastoral systems, that we really look at them holistically, that we look at all these dynamics, in the system, that it's not just the herders having too much livestock and overgrazing just because they love to do that, but because there are, really global issues behind that, right? And that this all is somehow connected. And then on the other side, to not simplify things and really look at each system individually, because you cannot generalize and make a general policy. And I think this is often something done in policies, very quickly, that you just say, okay, we need to reduce livestock numbers, point. And this is often, not leading them to a sustainable or to a satisfying outcome.
Yes, and it's the challenge also of with the primary sector. Each case is a case, so we don't have a one size fits all. So we need to be very careful about generalizations. Absolutely agree with you. And Simone, do you want
Yeah.
to give us a takeaway?
Yes, I think if you talk about pastoralism, you need to think that is marginal space, is dry, or it's mountain area, it's wetland. So it's an area that you cannot do other things. So you cannot. It's not. You cannot make crops. You cannot do that. So you need to think that if pastoralism disappear, what you do with this area, it's what we do with the people that live here. So it's so you need to help pastoralism to do that, and you need to find a way to find a solution that is a sustainable grazing. So you need that you can produce and conserve biodiversity. So you need to find solution, and it's very difficult because it's high mobility system. You have several people that are using the same space, so it's not so easy to find a way to make this equilibrium between production and ecosystem health and so on.
We saw in past sessions that these pastoralist systems they represent a very big percentage of the rangelands in the world. It's quite impressive. Do you think there are other models that could also assist this activity, as we see quite often merging, farming with the tourism and appealing to giving people different experience? Do you have a model that could actually be assisting pastoralism?
Yeah, but the main problem is that you missed to think by as a sociologist, because, for example, when you add value, for example, people do another activities, they use animal as a banking system. So if they have more revenue, they will increase the number of animals because it is their capital. So sometimes we say, okay, we'll develop this type of activity that they will reduce pressure on grazing, but it doesn't occur. Maybe the only thing that I see people that decrease the number of animals is when you increase the value chain of animal product. For example, in Senegal, they are putting a milking factory. And with this milking factory, the people decrease the number of animals because they need to increase the production. They find other solutions and so on. So maybe the main thing is to valorize the product from pastoralism before, to find other source of funding, because generally, if you find other source of funding, they will keep increasing the number of animals, they will not increase the quality of the product. But if you develop a value chain for this product, after they will try to increase the productivity, so they will reduce the number of animals to that the animals are more fit to eat, and so on and so on. So I think the main thing is to identify a value chain.
Okay, that's an interesting point. I was just going to say that to your first answer, that they would increase the number of animals. They are using the lean principle. Where is the value? And the value is in the animals. So I'm going to increase the number of animals. So we've learned something, Lena. I was surprised that you didn't say that we should also buy and look more to cashmere products, uh, because it would also help to assist those traditional pastoralism process that you have mentioned. So we don't have more questions. So I'm just going to share with you how you can take part in our short quiz, and invite all the participants to do a final assessment. Can you see the link? Yes, you are sharing the QR code. So if you want to have our certificates, I invite you just quickly. So you can see we are very active here in our sessions. We do a lot of things. We do Slidos, we do questions, we question us. So that's how we like things to go. We are really approaching the end. I hope you have enjoyed the topic that we have brought to you during this month of April. From our end, it was very rewarding to have excellent speakers, bringing us very different perspectives on a topic that is very relevant for agriculture, for the soils, for the livelihood of communities, and also landscapes. So let's bear in mind this as we go out and spread the word more about how we can build more resilient systems. Also to remind you that we will break for just 1 week, but we'll be back looking at European policies. How is European programs and policies shaping everything that we've been talking throughout these webinar cycles, from soil microbiome through biochar, control environment agriculture, and also livestock management? How is Europe looking and shaping incentives towards a more natural capital and regenerative food production? So if you can join us, we'll be back on the 7th of May. I wish you all a very good long weekend. A special thanks to our speakers. It was a real pleasure in my name and on behalf of the team to have you here. Also, a huge thank you to all the participants for your time and your commitment here with us. So that's all from my end. Thank you again, and I hope to see you soon.